Hello and welcome to the Ghibli Rewatch series of the Overly Animated Podcast, where we'll be going through every Studio Ghibli movie chronologically from the beginning. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Michelle Anderer.
Hello.
And Maddie Potter.
Hello.
Yes, this is the Ghibli Rewatch series. Join us in rewatching or watching for the first time all the Studio Ghibli movies now that they're available for streaming for the first time. Today is Castle in the Sky, or Laputa Castle in the Sky. Streaming for the first time. We got our first crack at HBO Max after it came out last week. Last week's podcast was recorded before, but I've had the chance to check out the Ghibli movies on HBO Max, and that gets positive marks. I think they're prominently displayed on HBO Max. They got the subs and the dubs there. You can switch back and forth really easily. Good video quality. And the subtitles on the subbed versions are not just a transcription of the dub like it is sometimes on Netflix. It's like the official Ghibli subtitles on the sub versions. So very happy with the presentation of the Ghibli movies on HBO Max. And a lot of people were talking about it this past week once they started coming out. So that's very exciting. And that's why we're doing this series, because a lot of people can have access to these Ghibli films for the first time in a legal manner, at least. And this is a new podcast in this Ghibli Rewatch series every Wednesday as we go through the whole catalog chronologically at overlyanimated.com. You can subscribe to the Ghibli Rewatch iTunes feed on Spotify and everywhere. So premise this podcast, I'm a Ghibli expert, seen all the movies a while ago, and will be joined as we go through co-hosts with a variety of Ghibli watching experience. Want to warn that we'll be getting into full spoilers for Castle in the Sky right away. Make sure you've seen this movie. Hopefully won't be spoiling just only vague spoilers from any other Ghibli films, but we'll be referring to a lot of things. So yes, make sure you've seen Castle in the Sky, come back, and then continue listening. And we'll be discussing both the subbed and dubbed versions actually this time. But primarily the subs usually, but watch whatever you prefer. You don't need to have seen one or the other to listen to these, podcasts. So let's get into Castle in the Sky, Laputa. I don't know which one we're going to call it as we go, but either I think is valid. Castle in the Sky, the official title, maybe. This is 1986. And this is Hayao Miyazaki's third directed film, coming off of the success of Nausicaa. He makes a movie with many similar elements to his earlier television series, Future Boy Conan, which probably not going to talk a lot about, but it definitely is worth mentioning that there's a lot of similar elements from that earlier TV show. This movie marked the launch of Studio Ghibli on June 15th, 1985. This is the first official movie under the Studio Ghibli brand, which they were able to create after the success of Nausicaa. They made the studio to create entirely high quality films, very unusual for anime studios to have all films being made, all really like high quality works. That's kind of what they're going for with Studio Ghibli here. Laputa came out in 1986. Not actually a big financial success right away. Miyazaki went against the grain of the Nausicaa type, like a young men driven kind of show, a lot of sci-fi at the time in Japan. And now he creates like a fantasy children's movie in Castle in the Sky. And so that, he's doing more of what he wants to do versus what he feels pressured to. By the Times doesn't immediately succeed, but they've certainly made a lot of money later on with this movie, as it's been very successful since then in Japan and across the world. This is considered an all-time great by a lot of people, and I know is a favorite of Michelle's and some other people as well. So it's very exciting. Let's get into it. So, Michelle, we've had you on, so we know that you're an experienced Ghibli watcher. You've seen a lot of these movies before. And, yes, I know it's one of your personal favorites. So tell us about your history with Castle in the Sky and what you think of it.
Okay, so this is the second anime thing I'd ever seen before, unless you want to count, like, odd episodes of Pokemon here and there as a child without cable. Like, I saw Spirited Away when I was, like, 8, and I, like, totally didn't understand it. I liked it, but I wasn't, like, ready for it. And then I saw this one in high school. We watched it with subs in my Japanese class on our teacher's, like, janky, burnt DVD. And it was kind of glitchy, but it was so good. I was totally blown away. Like, especially just like the visuals and the music were so good, but like honestly, like Shida and Pazu's relationship is like the heart of this movie, and it's the thing that I totally just like loved again and again coming back to. I love like the stakes of this movie. There's a lot more violence than I was expecting, is something that I presumed was aimed at children, at least in the United States, because I know Disney got the rights to distribute it. But like there's some deaths, man. There's a lot of explosions and shooting and just like, you know, and lots of scary military people doing things. And it's just like, oh man, this is not like, you know, boy goes to fight a dragon kind of adventure from the 1980s at all. And that's a big part of why I loved it. Like, you fall in love with like the towns, you fall in love with the locations. Like, even though it does really get pretty dark and scary, it never stops being like a fun ride the majority of the time, which I think is a pretty interesting decision to make for this movie. There's so many things about it that I think are such gems, but I'm going to save that till later. But like, there are a lot of reasons why this is my hands down favorite Miyazaki movie out of all of them. Hands
down your favorite. Okay, we're going to dig into even more reasons why, because that's great. Have you on very, very passionate about this movie. And we'll see what our other host thinks of this movie, with a potentially opposite perspective coming in. Just watch the movie, Maddie. So tell us what, so your first time, are you generally a new person to Ghibli films? And, what did you think of Castle in the Sky when you watched it?
I have experience with some of the movies. I watched Spirited Away, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Howl's Moving Castle when I was younger, not really a kid, but younger. And it wasn't that I didn't like them. I actually like those movies a lot. It's just, it's hard to watch these movies. It's difficult to find them, in streaming at least.
Yeah, and until now. Yep.
Until now. And so I have not spent a lot of time watching these movies, and so I've missed a lot of them. And I was really excited at this. This was the perfect excuse for me to finally get down and watch them. And I really enjoyed this movie. It was not what I was expecting, because the other Ghibli movies I had seen were much less, I guess. This movie is traditionally like, there's a villain, there are protagonists, and simple sounds like a bad way to put it, but it's very clear, like, this is the plot, this is what we're doing, and this is what the bad guys want. And in the other Ghibli movies I'd seen, it was definitely a little more loose on that front. It wasn't always very clear. It was, the villains were much closer aligned to the themes of the movies. It's what I'm trying to say, I think, in other movies. And in this movie, the villain is more closely associated with his goals, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just different than the movies I'd seen.
Interesting. Yeah. I think like this is like a Miyazaki's kind of traditional adventure movie. I think. Yeah. So I think in that regard, maybe simpler, at least in structure, than some later ones.
Yeah, that's probably the way I'd put it.
I would say straightforward, not necessarily simple, but straightforward goals, very clear cut.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it benefits from that when compared to
the clarity.
Yeah, I think so. I really like Castle in the Sky too. This wasn't, I think watching all these for the first time, this wasn't a like super personal favorite of mine, but it's obviously like great. So like I was like, it always stands out as really good. I didn't necessarily connect with it immediately as much, but there's elements of this movie which are really iconic, and I love. There's a few scenes in this movie are some of my favorite scenes ever in anything, so I'm excited to talk about those. I think it's maybe in some ways not as much of an oomph in the statements it's trying to make, which is maybe more interesting for our discussion to try to dive into like what the end of this movie is saying and stuff. I think like it's really nice that Castle in the Sky is a little bit unique from some of his other movies too. I mean, I think like Spirited Away maybe the closest. Like this is like, if Nausicaa is to Mononoke, this movie is to Spirited Away maybe in terms of somewhat of an earlier version of it. But I'd say Mononoke and Nausicaa end up being a little more similar than this in Spirited Away. But I think this movie like stands on its own in what it's trying to do. The robots in this movie are like the most iconic kind of element to me. I'm excited to talk about them. And just Laputa itself, I had a lot of memories of that, and it didn't disappoint revisiting the movie.
I'm sorry, I just want to add that this is the first one I've watched as an adult, so I was really blown away by the music. The score.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited to
isn't
ask
it
you about the score.
good?
Yeah.
One of the best things about it is how much the music just elevates every scene that it's used in.
Yeah, we'll be going through all of Joe Hisaishi's scores as we go through these movies, and
great!
I've been listening to this one, so I'm excited to talk about it. Yeah, so I mean, I think like there's a few headline kind of topics to get into, but I kind of want to first give Michelle an opportunity to like, is there a thing that makes this movie truly special compared to kind of some of these other Ghibli movies that you really love? Like, I know you said a bunch of them in the beginning, but like, what stands out in your mind when you think of Castle in the Sky as like what you love about it?
Well, there are certainly, like you pointed out, like there are just like moments that are just so gorgeous to witness that you just remember them a lot. Like Sheeta falling from the sky just from the very beginning with the score is just like such a standout visual, and it really just sets the tone for like, oh, this is like we're going somewhere. This is an adventure. We don't know exactly what's happening, what's going on with these kids yet, but like something that for sure. Like also just like when they're in the clouds during the storm and they finally like the calm of going in and resting on like the floating castle itself and just them witnessing it together for the first time is a really big moment. There's a bunch, and there's a lot of funny moments, but I think again for me, like as beautiful as it is, I feel like it really is the main two characters that like sold me where so many movies like Miyazaki has not made a bad movie, and there are some that come very close to this, but I feel like I was so surprised by how Sheeta and Pazu were handled that like that initial like shock and relief like can never be taken away from 15-year-old me watching it for the first time. I think like, and that's a very personal reaction, but like it's absolutely the reason like it's my favorite.
In what way and how they were handled?
Oh man, I mean, do we want to go to character stuff right away?
We could talk about that at the top. Yeah, I mean, do you is it their relationship or is it them individually as characters?
It's both of those things. I think I guess I was a little because like like Miyazaki, like we know now Miyazaki has this reputation for kind of pushing against whatever like traditionally was the focus of characters during time periods, and the fact that like both these characters have a lot of time together that feels very equal, but they also have a lot of scenes apart where they do things. I think the fact that like Sheeta opens the movie is kind of amazing just because like I think a lot of like if you didn't know much of this movie, you saw like a poster, you might assume Pazu's the main character just because a lot of times in the poster, the shot they use of Sheeta is her like floating down, which feels like a lot less like not like she doesn't have as much autonomy, but just like she's not as prominent, she's not as active. Like that's how you like that says a lot about how you expect to view her character. But in the actuality of the movie, like it's just so I love Pazu, I love Sheeta so much. Like the reasons I love Sheeta is because like I know that a lot of folks who like Ghibli, they sometimes like they'll say like Sheeta doesn't seem like as like active or feminist as other Miyazaki heroines when compared to like say like Nausicaa or Chihiro or even like Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle, but that's not true. She is just as feminist, but like her feminism is in a very like normal girl kind of way. That gives this character that very much just like rises to the occasion when she's given the opportunity, which is like really amazing because Pazu, like he's also like a pretty normal child, but the difference is like I feel like as an audience we come to expect maybe that he will do that a little more just because like that's how a lot of stories like tailored to young male audiences tend to like show male characters that are active leads in shows like this. So it's not necessarily something we assume from Sheeta, but it is from Pazu. So I feel like that's one of the big differences. And the fact that like she she doesn't channel like her being an active character in the same way Pazu does all the time, because she's a different person. And even though like Pazu might have more masculine traits and Sheeta might have more feminine traits, like they still have so many moments of strength together. That's just really incredible, because like again, like or in the movie you have Sheeta like knocking out Muska with a bottle to escape, and like there are moments like they're on the train together and she like insists on helping Pazu like shovel the coal and stuff, or like when she goes up on the top of the ship to talk to Pazu, is like, Sheeta, like you can't be up here. She's like, no, like I want to, oh, this is cool. And then like when Dola tries to talk her to come down, she's like, hey, like I'm not gonna come down because I'm a girl, you're a girl too. Like she has a lot of these moments where like not only does she work really well together with Pazu as a teammate, but she clearly is able to push against things and be active in her own way. It's just like a lot more subtle than I think we're used to noticing when it comes to characters, because we're used to like very masculine ways of presenting this kind of assertiveness, you know? And like let's not forget, like I would say Sheeta has the bravest moment in the movie when she stands up against like arguably the most dangerous thing, which is Muska, when he's pointing a gun at her, and she gives this amazing speech. And it's such a powerful moment. And I feel like that's the heart of like, that's the culmination of her spirit in that movie. And I feel like you watch her like getting more and more of that as the movie progresses. And to Pazu's credit, like Pazu is like the ideal, like if you're going to have a friend with very gentle romantic overtones with sometimes, but in a non-committal way that I absolutely
It's a good description
love.
Of this movie.
Thank you, Miyazaki, for that. He's very kind. He's very genuine. He supports Sheeta. He's there to be strong when like she can't in some situations, but he never pushes back at her when she asserts herself. And I think like that is the best you can do as somebody else, because like, I think they both understand that they're different people coming at this adventure from different situations. Like he wants to understand like what his dad saw and kind of save the name of his dad and his family. And she's literally the descendant of these people, and she wants to understand her lineage. Like those are very different reasons, but they come together to find out the truth together, and they support each other every step of the way. And it's one of like the most genuine things about this movie. And there's never like any resentment or just like someone trying to control the other person. And like time is equally shared with them. One of them's not more important than the other. And it's just so nice to see how balanced that is. It just feels like such a masterclass of like, this is what you can show people about how to treat each other, or children how to treat each other. Like, it just blew my mind. Like when I was 15, I was like, oh my God, like, these respectful, wonderful, hopeful children. Like, this is the most amazing relationship I've ever seen. And, like, that's more than anything what I fell in love with. Like, that right there.
Okay, that's awesome. I think you covered, like, Pazu and Sheeta's characters and their relationship, and we can talk about all these together. And I think you're totally, like, describing what Miyazaki is going for with these characters and their relationship. So you're, like, totally buying into that. And we can read some quotes about what he's going for here. And yeah, I love. I felt your passion for them in what you're talking about there. It just generally like Sheeta having like an equal amount of agency to Pazu in this movie. Yeah, I think that is a pretty revolutionary thing, even for now. But like for 1986, you think about it too. Like absolutely. I mean, Sheeta ends up being the one who like gets captured in certain like plot conveniences, but I think she if the movie strikingly, I feel like always does present her with agency even within those scenes.
Like her, when she's in like damsel situations, it's very believable just because like I feel like Miyazaki is very smart about like another reason I feel like Sheeta's like able to be who she is just because we just like when we were talking in the Nazca podcast, she doesn't have the burden of being the only woman in this entire movie because there is Dola, and Dola's a very different kind of woman who is equally fascinating and amazing and assertive and strong in her own way, but Sheeta's like a very different person from her, and not always. Sometimes like they're very similar, which is hilarious, but I feel like that again gives Sheeta a little more freedom to be a little more stereotypically little girl that like we're used to, because the thing with that is like while we may all like admire someone like Nazca, who just seems so amazing and strong and such a natural leader and so capable, like in reality, we're probably a lot more like Sheeta. Like she's the kind of like strong, capable person we can aspire to be, because like she's such an every woman kind of character who again is just thrown to the situation and is able to rise to the opportunity because the opportunity presented itself. And I think that's just like, it's so good. And no one ever talks about how great Sheeta is, but she's amazing. And it's not about her like being as strong as like Pazu. Like she doesn't have to be. Like she's strong in her own way. And even though she does get kidnapped, like she again has the most powerful moment, like staring down like the ultimate monster just with her words and her like her validation of truth, like that cannot be denied, you know, which is just so good. Like Miyazaki knew what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I led that scene of her her standing up to confronting Muska. Definitely one of the scenes I want to talk about with this movie. But yeah, no, you're at like Sheeta, not often discussed with the upper echelon of Ghibli heroines, but and I think largely because she has to share the stage with Pazu. Maybe a similar thing going on with Mononoke. But yeah, this is a great defense of why she should be considered up there. I think everything you're talking about is great. Maddie, what's your impression of these two characters as you're watching the movie and their relationship?
I think that I'll start with their characters and then the relationship. But I think that they are, of the movies that I've seen, they're the most, I guess, childish, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, they are kids, and they act like kids, and I appreciate it. I appreciate how much they don't have they have very childish views on the world and views on what they want and what's going on. And I really buy that Pazu would really attach to this girl that just floated down out of the sky. And I believe that Sheeta would latch on to this kid who is the only person really helping her at this time. I really enjoy that. I really enjoy their interactions. I enjoy that they don't feel like, in a lot of adventure movies, they kind of make this male and female lead. They have them meet kind of like, oh, they were destined to meet type things. But these two, they met, and it really feels like, the best way I can put it is they really feel like they met, and they just were like, oh, we're friends immediately. Like, we just vibe.
Yeah.
We vibe really hard. And I guess that there are like romantic there has to be romantic stuff because heteronormativity and all that, but I really, really, really like them and their bond because it feels very real and very true. That's something that only that like two kids could have in that moment when they meet each other, because when kids meet each other like that, they do just latch on to that kid they meet that's the same age as them, but they're like, wow, you're awesome. You have a magic stone. And like, wow, you're awesome. You know how to do all this stuff. You know all your way around town. You know how to dress me up and hide me from the pirates. Like, I really buy into it, and I really buy into the relationship. And I was surprised by that, because usually I think that the way that they have these heteronormative relationships gets a little bit tedious. But these two, I bought into it immediately, and I've really enjoyed them the whole way through.
That's awesome. Bought into them immediately. Yeah, having a magic stone, very desirable friend trait as a kid, probably.
I mean, yeah.
Yes.
Like, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, that's just kids act. That's just how kids are.
Yeah,
and
yeah. I think they're really like realistic kids, and I want to get, that's another topic I want to get into too. All kind of tying together with these, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like Pazu and Sheeta, you know, like I feel like you got Nausicaa, which is the standout tentpole Miyazaki heroine. That movie focuses more on her characterization than I feel like any of his future movies focus on. And I feel like Pazu and Sheeta is the start of maybe more subdued characterizations for Miyazaki's main characters, and not just to call them out. I think it's all of the future ones, basically. Maybe Kiki is an exception to that. But I think you watch it again, and they do stand out more than I remember in terms of like how good of characters they are. But the thing that really stands out to me is their relationship, and I think that's what the movie's mainly concerned with. And just this just joyful bonds that they have, which is really fun the entire movie, and they're just always so positive and supporting and sympathetic to each other. It's like the heart. It's the heart of the movie in a lot of ways. We've talked about it potentially being romantic. Got to read this quote from Miyazaki from the. I'm going to bring in quotes from Susan Napier's Miyazaki World book here, which he's asked. She says, but Miyazaki refused to make any romantic connection explicit. He grew impatient with an interviewer who kept harping on why the two didn't kiss at the joyous moments when they finally arrive on Laputa. Miyazaki says, no, they wouldn't kiss. That's the bad influence of Hollywood. If they had, it would have been a different relationship.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah,
I stand him so
Miyazaki,
hard right now.
You're right.
So he doesn't see it as romantic. I mean, I feel like there's like a clear connection that is generally associated with romantic in a media lens with these two. But they're also just like kids that are just really having happy times together.
Happy times.
I like I was saying with the kid thing, I just didn't really see it as romantic at any point, which is very shocking for like two leads like this. It's very impressive, honestly.
I think they just have so much respect for each other. Like that's a big part of their bond. It's just like this clear mutual respect and admiration, but also like they're on each other's level, which is why they work so well as a team and they get out of so many scrapes. Mm-hmm. It's just so good. They're so adaptable to all these situations and they lean on each other, which is like part of what I love. Like I love that Shida, like, she kind of shares this moment of destroying Laputa, which is like really her call because it is like, you know, her lineage with him and just like the hand clasp, the iconic hand clasp when they hold it together. It's like they're in all this together. Like it's equally there. And like she trusts him to do it with her. And it's just so good. I just love them. They're such good babies. But they've also grown a lot. I don't know. Yeah. They're like 13, 12, somewhere in there.
Yeah, something. I mean, I think they have this deep intimacy between each other very quickly, and like I think like it's something very easy to read as romantic, but something you could also just not read as romantic. And you know, I think we know now Miyazaki's not really intending it to be that, but I do think he's displaying this kind of connection that is often romantic. So I feel like the thing people, if you ship them, I feel like you're latching onto the same thing that is intended with Miyazaki. It's this connection between them.
Yeah.
And it's just like not manifesting in that exact way. These tentpole scenes, I feel like with Pazu and Shita, them Shida waking up at Pazu's house and them meeting awake for the first time. That's like a great start to their relationship. Such a joyous scene. They like release the birds, it's really like fun, and they keep that energy up the whole time. One of my favorite scenes of the movie. This would be one of the three ones I want to talk a lot about, but them keeping watch on top of the airship as Dola listens on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible scene between the two of them. Them arriving at Laputa, talk a lot more about this scene. I mean, there's the moment where their faces are very close together. They're like playing in like the grass of where they're laughing and stuff. Just a great display of the two of them. And yeah, they unleash the destruction spell together at the end after Shita confronts Muska. So they're just really, their relationship really shines throughout the entirety of the movie. And I think it's like in a way, which I'm not sure we really see from a later Miyazaki movie, just this pair that is their connection is kind of the heart of the movie. I think, you know, Miyazaki doesn't really generally do romance. There's not really any kissing in his movies until right at the end of our journey here. So this is one that maybe is the closest. And yet even this one is not really intended to be that. So I think this is a recurring theme we'll see in him not really being super concerned with displaying romance in his movies. We can get into, we're talking about them being kids. I think this movie being a kids movie is an interesting topic to talk about, because, you know, you might say like, there's a lot of people that die in this movie, kind of as Michelle said, which is it's kind of shocking towards the end.
I was surprised, to say the least.
So much murder.
And I think the other thing is Muska is arguably the most evil person in any Miyazaki movie.
Yeah, like, right, though? Like, honestly, I think he's, like, more dangerous than anyone else. Like, in Nazca, even. Like, he's just so bloodthirsty and just revels in it in a way that, like, I just don't think we've seen before.
His villains are usually sympathetic, I would say.
Yeah.
This is a straight villain here.
Yeah, he's straight up villain.
I want to talk about how amazing Mark Hamill is as this villain, though.
Mark Hamill plays the villain in the dub. I've only listened to the dub in the trailer, and I was so insulted because I love this movie so much that I just refused to listen to the dub ever because it just sounded like such a joke. But Mark Hamill does sound like an interesting choice.
Maddie, you watched the dub. What did you think?
Yes, have I not talked about that yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, so I watched the dub because I don't want to start a fight about it, but I watch the dubs in most things, and I'm not going to tell people what to watch. I watch subs when there's nothing else available, but I watch dubs because I like to watch the animation. I like to watch and see, because people put a lot of work into animating it. Like, for live action shows, I feel less inclined and it's less necessary for me to watch the subs, but for something like this, where people put in so much effort to every single shot, every single frame, I really want to, watch it and just enjoy it and not have to look at the bottom of the screen the whole time. And I get why, from watching this dub, I will complain about some of the things in the dub. I don't think the dub is perfect, but I do stand by the way I watched it and think that I did get to see all this animation, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, like we said in the beginning, any way you're watching it is valid. Miyazaki, since you're the first person, Maddie, that's watched a dub in the series, so we can, actively for this podcast, so we can get into this in this general topic. Miyazaki is kind of on the record as saying you should watch the dub. Not for that exact reason, but I think that's a very valid reason. I think he says, the dub is specifically intended to be culturally relevant to the people watching it, whereas you watch the sub and it's just the literal translation versus the dub. They might try to make things more culturally understanding.
I'm not sure if that's why I ever watch a dub. I want the same meaning. I want the meaning that I want to know the message.
Yeah, I think it's valid. I want to know the exact meaning of the original text, but I think Miyazaki is, which is obviously a very important opinion, saying that his preference would be people watching the most understandable thing to him. I think the Ghibli dubs, the later dubs, there's a very early dub of Nazca, which is memorably, notoriously horrible. But there's all the later Disney and other dubs of the Ghibli movies. I do think there's some of the dubs of all time that the most effort went into. Some of the these dubs are incredibly great. All of them are high quality. I've seen the Castle dub. It's fine. Mark Hamill, he's really the highlight. He's perfect as.
Is he a fun villain? Because I really hope he's not a fun villain. No, but Muska's not fun.
No, Michelle, listen, he is completely evil, and by fun, I mean, he is, I enjoy him. Because he's so bad.
I think he's it's like a hamming it up as a,
but doesn't that take some of the edge off?
I read Muska's that a little bit in the original, too.
I think, Michelle, you should experience it, because by the end, or just watch some of his scenes, specifically near the end, because he recorded this, he did this before he did the Joker.
I was wondering about that, yeah.
And at the end of the movie, Muska laughs, and it's fairly close to his Joker laugh, and it's honestly really unhinged and really creepy, and I loved it. Okay. I love Michelle. You just watch it, and you're Muska, reads as this terrifying, really upsetting person. And he's that's how he came across to me, through Mark Hamill's voice acting and through the movie. I think that he had fun with it, but I also think that every character in the movie is having fun with it. I don't think he's having any less fun with it than any other character. It's Mark Hamill, so I'm latching onto him because it's Mark Hamill.
It is Mark Hamill. He's incredible.
There's this scene, literally the first scene he walks in, I had no, knowledge of this movie at all coming in. And the first scene he comes in, I knew it was Mark Hamill because the voice actor was just so incredible the second he walked into the room. It was so incredible. It's the scene where he's in the base with, Sheeta, and he's, circling around her when she's a prisoner.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, he is so evil and he has so much presence that Mark Hamill is not the problem with the dub. I'm just gonna say that.
I think he's the best part. Yeah,
that makes me feel a little more convinced.
Muska's like, he's not obviously the villain at first, right? Like, he's a villain that emerges from these this kind of force.
He knocks him on the head with the bottle at the very beginning. You get
he's
a
also
sense
he's a guy in a suit, and there's a few of them.
He's got glasses. That's how you know he's evil.
I knew he was the villain. Is that Mark Hamill was playing him.
Yeah. No, this ends up being kind of in the lineage of Mark Hamill's voicing villain's career, including Ozai, and
it's not clear that he's like as evil and horrifying as he truly is right off the bat, but I feel like you definitely know that he's like kind of shady just from the way she responds.
He's like one of the
there's
like the military guy
like,
too, and
until later.
Yeah,
like it's really incredible. Like the beginning of it, he's very like put together, and his voice comes
courteous and kind of sterile and just uptight and
And Mark Hamill does that. He comes across as this like businessman almost, and then by the end, he's just falling apart, and he leans into like this Joker, not quite Joker. Like he doesn't go that unhinged, but he leans into this Joker-esque laugh, and this Joker like, I am king, I am in charge, and it's just so great. It's like a very incredible performance that I never knew Mark Hamill had.
Yeah, I think that's the best part of the dub, and none of the other parts really stood out to me.
I agree. And it's
who does Dola? Does that person have a fun time with Dola?
Dola's fun. Like, everyone's fun. It's just no one, like, Mark Hamill's just
has that kind of...
Dola is Cloris Leachman. That's pretty cool.
Oh.
I do think that they did keep the comedic timing really well in the dub. Like, there are some really funny jokes. I was actually laughing pretty hard at some of the jokes in the...
It's a funny movie.
It is.
Like, there's so many moments just, like, I'll never get over the absurdity of, like, the man off, like...
Oh, my God.
Like, we can talk about that quickly.
Oh, my God.
That because it feels so out of nowhere.
It is.
But, like, they revel in the absurdity of it, and there's even a great line where the wife is like, "Who's gonna like fix that shirt you just ripped off your body?" And he's like,
in the dub, the wife says, "I'm not fixing that."
Yeah, like what are you doing, dude? Is this worth it? It's just so good.
That's the most random part of the movie. This
like having this amazing brawl, the minor town gets together and fights the evil government and pirates, and it's just like it's so good. It's such a pro small town kind of moment.
Yeah, we're gonna circle back to those themes, but that's a fun. That's the end. Their shirts coming off.
They had this like in the dub. There was a line where they like in the scene of the man off, where the mining guy like punches the pirate guy. And the other pirates catch him, and they say, "He told you that mom looks blah blah blah." Like it was cut off by like the noise. They were like telling him that they made fun of his mom, essentially. And I wonder if that was in the sub.
I don't remember that.
Was it?
Yeah,
That's sweet.
They like ad-libbed it. I think.
Amazing line.
They caught him.
I think they say something like, "Come on, like you can get him. Like don't give up."
Yeah.
Something.
They replaced that with another joke where they're like, "No, he told you your mom is fat," and they push him back towards the other guy.
That does work really well just because like all of the pirates are such mama's boys, and it's like so amazing.
Like that was the scene where I realized the pirates are not going to be villains.
No, they're just mama's boys. They're just happy to be there.
Okay, there's a lot of subjects open right now, but to close, no, it's fun. It's fun to close out Muska. I think he's a very standout Ghibli character looking back, just because he's the straight up villain in a line of kind of sympathetic villain types in Miyazaki movies, and I think he's a great part of this movie. I
mean, he does circles around like what we assume I think probably is a bigger threat, which is just like the government dude, just because like they have all this machinery and they have such a presence and they just seem like such a threat to just like the coal mining town and like everyone else. But then once they get on Laputa and he's able to like take control of the ancient power, it's like all of them are just extinguished like insects really, and that's part of like the true horror of like the sort of person he is, because he's like laughing about it, he's like reveling in their murder, and he's like watching it, and Sheeta like turns away because she's so disgusted by it. And that's when he goes from just like, you know, your average gross terrible person to like truly monstrous, which is because like I think the other guy like in a way he was like kind of stupid Like he wasn't like part. Like I think like part of Muska being so smart and calculating is like an extra layer to his horror at the same time. Whereas the general dude was just very straightforward. Like we're gonna not listen to you and just charge ahead because that's what military guys do. And he's a little more one note, so he didn't seem like as terrible as Muska, honestly.
Yeah. He definitely stands out among the people around him in the beginning of the movie, and then just with the harnesses the power of Laputa. He's the reveal that he's also Laputin. Yeah.
Is that the
I think it's
Laputin?
I don't know if that's he's like Sheeta's cousin. Turns out.
Distant
cousin.
cousin.
Yeah.
And then he even hints about like we're gonna be here a long time together, and it's just like, oh man,
There's
truly terrifying human being.
Can I just say there's a lot of implication of adults hitting on Sheeta, and I don't like it.
Okay. Let's talk about it. Fine. We already brought up the pirate sons, so let's talk about that. So I don't think there's anything with Muska that's like there's that one line. I think the movie generally avoids getting into any implication of that. With
the
Muska.
dub drifted away from that with Muska, at least. Like it didn't do that with.
Certainly, no. I don't think there's. But I think the explicit thing is Dola's sons, who are adult men working on the ship, are all kind of hitting on Sheeta at one point, trying to gain her attention and favor.
There's a reason for this, though. Like, as I've gotten older, like, it doesn't honestly bother me. One, because, like, the few times they are, it's kind of played as a joke because, like, when they all go in the kitchen, it just becomes amazing because she just puts them all to work. Yeah. So they're just all in there doing the stuff for her, which is just so good. But also, like, because they're space pirates, they just spend a lot of time in the air. They probably never see girls. So I think honestly part of it was just like any girl's just going to be such a change who's not their mom for them. And that's like an event of itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
even
if
it's
it's like a romantic way, it's just oh, she's so pretty and we never have girls on our ship. Like, this is so exciting.
I definitely think that's like the text and like that's the point. But also that doesn't make it okay that adults are hitting on her. And I don't like that.
Yeah, it's played for comedic effect in the movie, and it's not taken seriously, so I think it kind of avoids being this huge deal, because it's just like, it's purposefully a joke, and they're also just very innocently kind of doing this, but it's displayed as this romantic attraction, which is, that I feel like is the part of this movie being from 1986 that seems the most a while ago. Yeah, I don't think this would be there if it was the last 10 years.
The biggest thing for me is when they act really disappointed when, like, they realize that the Pazu and Sheeta are like connecting really well in the night. Like that's the moment where I'm like, you didn't need to show that shot. Like if it was just the kitchen scene, I'd probably be okay with it. But they have the shot where they're all like kind of like mad or like annoyed that he's getting this, and it's very
the natural conclusion to this arc. I guess, but it's I think we could have done something else with the sons. The aspect that is I think is maybe the best for me is that they see they hear that Sheeta is like a young Dola, and that is like increases their interest in her, I guess.
They're confused. You're like, really? Like she's gonna become mama? And they almost like can't even imagine it.
It's very interesting.
They're like, oh, okay, now we see it.
I think that's the funniest part of it, but it's very weird, all of that. I don't know. I think the amount we've discussed it is as the amount it is important to the movie. Okay, back to this being that we've discussed a lot of elements, including that one, which is like, is this a kids movie? But I think like the Miyazaki's intent is to make more of a quote unquote kids movie coming off of Nausicaa, which is aimed at kind of young men. And I think the difference between his kids movies in like this and Spirited Away, which I also think is a quote unquote kids movie, versus like a Nausicaa or Mononoke, I don't think it's a noticeable difference to us, our vantage point. I think it's maybe just like the general perspective. It's the same thing with a lot of like older kid shows we cover, in terms of this like not being a super meaningful distinction. But I think the bigger thing is Miyazaki wants to like make a movie about kids. I have a quote from Susan Napier here. At a time when Japanese animators were increasingly aiming for males in their teens and 20s, they graduated from heartfelt, even sentimental entertainment and sought out edgier heroes in more adult situations. Miyazaki hated this new direction. So you want to see bad characters, you fool? Miyazaki asked. He went on to criticize the sort of bad character who talks back impudently to his elders. Miyazaki ended his critique with characteristic vehemence. When I see that sort of thing, the characters seem so obnoxious, I feel like knocking them down. The director believed in creating child characters who were believable and interesting, but also fundamentally decent. Rather than presenting obnoxious little terrors, he carefully developed children who contend with calamity and even catastrophe while maintaining a resilient and upbeat attitude. So you got some great Miyazaki quotes in there, as there are a lot of, you fool.
Oh, man, that is so... It makes so much sense watching this movie.
I think this is what you described in the beginning, Michelle.
Absolutely.
It's just the... Yeah.
That's the enjoyment of Shita and Pazu, like, in a nutshell. They're decent people who were decent to each other. And, like, I don't know, it's a very hopeful message in the way, like, Nausicaa's, like, navigating a world that is so fraught by, like, the damage humanity has done to it, to the planet and to itself. I feel like Pazu and Shita are very much, like, the younger generation, like, facing the like, destruction of the adult world, and they turn away from the ultimate power and decide to destroy it for the sake of, like, the earth and just, like, the more simpler lives they want to go back to. Like, they want to go on this adventure, but they don't want to have the adventure forever. Like, the real end of the adventure for them is going back and meeting Shita's yaks on her farm, you know?
Yeah. They're just such joyful, charismatic, kind of like just good. Like they're really sympathetic. I mean, Pazu's not the type of character that I think is sometimes inherently sympathetic to people like us. But he's just so sweet and great. Like,
he's very genuine. Like, he always checks in with Shita. He always makes sure she's okay.
He's so respectful of her.
He's so respectful. And, like, Shita in turn is, like, very trusting of him. Like, and they, like, trust each other to be each other's strength, which is just, like, so good to see. Because, like, again, in, like, the 80s and the 90s, like, a lot of boy-girl dynamics are like, oh, girls suck. Oh, boys are too stupid. And that's, like, literally it. Until they get old enough to date each other. And then sometimes it's still kind of there, and it's just the worst thing.
Even after they start dating, it's still there.
Yeah, it's still that. And so it's like, to see them just like each other as people, and like whether or not they're like attracted to each other, it's like they think, like Maddie was saying, like they're both kids, and they just like, they think each other is so cool, and they want to help out each other, and they don't question each other. They just get it done, you know? And they lift each other up.
I just think it's so incredible that, like, their introductions are so short. Like, this movie's 2 hours, and it's like their introductions are so short, and they meet each other so early in it. But I know who they are. By the time they're meeting in that scene where they wake up, where Shita wakes up in that hut, I already know their characters alone, and I'm just here to see what they're like together, because we get to see Shita like escape and all that, and that whole scene is like really fantastic and fun, and you get to see what Shita's character kind of is. And then we get to see Pazu's when he catches her, in that whole just really short bit where he catches her and sets her down and puts his coat on her and then immediately runs off to do his work, is so just really, really tight. And I really like how quickly it gets across who this kid is. I love a lot of this. There's just so many, like, the more I'm thinking, the more we're talking about it, the more I love these like little scenes that, like, how much they get across about the characters so quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think these, there's not the time put in the beginning with these characters to make these like super deep characterizations. It's just kind of like you get on, the movie gets you on the level that you're supposed to be with Pazu and Shita very quickly, and like holds that and develops their relationship. And I think it like works so well for the story that they're telling.
Yeah.
But yeah, the movie over 2 hours, spends very little time in the beginning, and then spends only like half an hour at Laputa at the end. So it's like
it's an adventure. It's about the journey movie. Not the destination.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what this movie's definitely going for. Close out the characters we're talking about. We've talked about her a little bit already in Dola.
Oh my god, the most pleasant surprise in all of anime.
Wow,
Dola,
that's a bold statement.
The granny space pirate.
Yeah.
Like, even saying that's like,
why did you say space pirate? They're not in space.
Sky pirates.
Space guy, you know, maybe they go to space sometimes. Who knows?
Oh,
but she's amazing. Just like, oh my god. Like, again, like, her body just like defies everything. It is the most amazing grandma, but like, she got heft. she got thick build and she has fun and she is so good at using giant guns and balancing precariously on exploding train cars and just oh my god, she's so I love that she kind of has this witch energy just because she's old and she has kind of a cackly voice, at least in the Japanese sub version. And she's just having fun. She just loves her job and she's cutthroat, but she also is one of those amazing characters that even though she's really tough, she has a molten core. She has a soft heart behind all of her sky pirating ways. And when it's pierced by the right children, she becomes a grandma to them. And the juxtaposition of that, just soft molten core grandma that has a million sons who admire her and will follow her into any battle, and this amazing tough, thick, space pirate grandma who will just go after anything if it's shiny and she wants it. And she's so amazing. When do we ever see Dola in the world? The more I learn about Miyazaki just through your research, still, and the more I'm okay, this makes sense. But Dola, man, I never saw her coming when I was 15, but I was just oh my god,
Dylan.
Where have you been in my life?
Dylan, is this the most Michelle tangent ever?
It was on topic. It was very Michelle. It was great. Okay, Michelle loves Dola is a entry in this long line of really incredible older women characters that Miyazaki has. And you could argue she is maybe the best one. I think there's an argument for that.
I don't think that. I think one thing Miyazaki really likes is his varied old lady characters.
Yeah.
He's think about the witch in Spirited Away. I think just as interesting a character as Dola, but very different. You got all those grannies and Ponyo. You got the nice neighbor granny in Totoro. You got the granny.
We just had Kushana last movie.
There are so many freaking cool grannies, and they're all different, but they're all so old. And even Sophie for half the movie and Howl's a grandma. And I love that he draws them super wrinkly and baggy, and sometimes they have these giant warts on their faces, but they're still supposed to be super sweet and lovable as these old kind of crony women. And it's just oh my god, Miyazaki, you love grandmas so much. I have more appreciation for grandmas in media because of you. You spend so much time with them.
Yeah. Okay, you're talking about you're talking about grannies, which is a good one. I was talking about middle-aged and older women too, and I think there's both of those. True. But yeah, you're right. There's also she could relate her to the witches in Spirited Away and stuff. Yeah, we've been talking about the Miyazaki's mom analog characters in every movie. This is definitely Dola. Here's a quote from Susan Napier. She says, "Dola is widely considered to be an affectionate homage to Miyazaki's mother Yoshiko, who had died during the making of Nausicaa. While this inquisitive, morally upright Nausicaa also shares elements of Yoshiko Miyazaki's personality, Dola's meddlesomeness and flamboyance clearly accord with the Miyazaki children's memory of their mother. Miyazaki's younger brother Shiro wonders whether at some level Laputa was an awkward but ardent farewell present to their recently deceased mother." So
she is mischievous. You remember that part where she rips the meat off and holds it in her mouth, and it's so lovingly animated. She raises her eyebrow. It's so good. What an amazing character. They even make a fart joke with her. They run the gambit with Dola. They really do.
I forgot they had a fart joke.
I know, right? In this movie, it's this movie gets really scary. There's a lot of murder sometimes, but also just have a fart joke. Why not?
Yeah.
We can have fun still.
Yeah, I think the flamboyance of Dola really stands out among all these other types of characters. And
she takes her skirt off to reveal pants because she's all right, activate business mode. Gotta steal these kids. Yeah. It's just so good.
Steal these kids.
So
Is that business mode?
That's business mode for pirates, I guess.
Business mode. I also just think it's really cool. Before we move on from Dola, I just want to gush. So she has a partner. I think it's very interesting that she's very much the muscle / like head of tactical operations. Like, she's the one who looks in the map. She's the one who figures navigation strategy. She goes out on the ships, her little dragonfly ships with all her boys, and gets the treasure. Her husband stays on the ship, and he's like the mechanical engineer person. And they're very comfortable in this arrangement.
Yeah.
Like, they really seem to like each other a lot. Like, they had that nice little moment playing chess when they're just talking everything over. And I just also think that's really cool, just seeing like this pair of people who have like different interests, and it's not a big deal that Dola's like kind of the one leading most of the like adventures that they have. Like, it works for them, and in some ways I think it's a nice parallel to Shita and Pazu as a younger generation.
I like that. Yeah.
Dylan, were you surprised to learn she hadn't ranted yet?
No, she said gush. Yeah, now I just want to gush this one. No, the whole thing was a gush, but we loved it. Okay, it was
Sorry, I just had to ask.
No, I was going to say stuff about Dola, but Michelle covered it all, so there you go.
I have nothing to say about Dola. Like, literally nothing. That Michelle has not.
No, Michelle, you cover it, but just her reacting to the scene of Pazu and Shita while they're keeping watch, I think it's just this amazing soft side of her, and you talked about that earlier in your Dola speech, but that's one of my favorite parts of her.
And you see her face of shock when he's like, she puts on a strong front, but she's really softy, and Dola's like, oh, he knows. It's so cute.
That's true. Yeah.
That's really funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought this was going to be my first topic, but we went into other directions, so we'll see how much time we get spent on this.
Are you surprised, Dylan, with us?
No, I shouldn't have been surprised. We'll talk about this every Miyazaki movie, but the environmentalist aspect of this movie, and then also the morality. But I think it's interesting for Laputa specifically because it has this potentially open-ended ending that I'm interested to hear your guys' interpretations of. But first we can start with the environmentalist aspects, which I think are largely seen through once we arrive at Laputa and how it's kind of been overrun by nature. You see the robots caring for the one caring for the natural elements of Laputa. We see that underneath Laputa is a tree at its core. And at the end, it starts floating into space. Actually, space this time. Upper sky, upper sky, maybe towards space eventually. We've been talking about Shita's speech towards Muska. Here's the kind of climactic line. She says, "Your weapons may be powerful, your pitiful robots may be many, but you can't survive apart from the Earth." Which you can't survive apart from the Earth is kind of the I think tentpole environmentalist line of this movie. And Muska's trying to have this like cold, technologically driven takeover of Laputa, but Laputa at its core is just a tree, and that's kind of like his undoing, I guess. And want to note that this line in the dub at the end is the world cannot live without love. Which
interesting. Okay.
Which I found to be a I don't like that translation because I think
Earth
it loses
and love are similar, but definitely not the same thing.
Yeah.
One's more specific.
Thank you, Dylan, because that explains one of my biggest gripes with the movie.
Oh, okay.
What was that?
I just thought that the end of it didn't really tie into the messages that I know Miyazaki likes hitting on, and I didn't think that things really tied together well with like. I still think it's very loose, but I think that it ties together a little bit better, knowing that was what was really being said there.
That's like the most explicit environmentalist line of the movie. But
there's also the title. Yeah. So you got Shita. She bonks Muska on the head. She falls off the ship. But then you cut to that sequence, and you see the rise and fall of the Laputians, I guess. The Laputians, because like you see, like it starts out very basic with like a dude and like a propeller on a stick by a windy valley, and then it escalates to digging machines underground that have propeller systems, and then there's a whole fleet of them in the air, and then finally there's like these floating castle cities, and then you see one fall and all these people get off the ship. And then you cut to Shita, like, standing with her yak with the similar propeller thing over a valley. And, like, that tells you, like, all you need to know. It's like, they figured out technology. They tried to get away from the Earth. They failed, and they returned. And I think the fact that like the tree is a big deal, but also like the tree was not supposed to be that big. They probably planted a pretty small tree, and with no one around, it was just able to grow its roots everywhere and become so huge and reclaim this very technologically advanced sky empire, you know? And I think the reclaiming of the empire is part of why the tree is important too. Because I remember she has a line with Muska where she says like you can't like be like our ancestors, like they were awful, and do you know why they're all extinct now? Because they couldn't maintain this sky dominance. It like destroyed them. That's what destroyed them. And if you try, the same thing will happen to you essentially.
Yeah, Michelle, going off of that, what's your interpretation of what the movie is saying at the end? Well, Laputa is basically just this tree at the end and is floating away from the earth.
I think it was like the earth was reclaiming this very man-made thing and kind of restoring the balance. And I think the fact that they would rather destroy the technology, like the very man-made kind of enhancements of the city, and they'd rather that be gone and go back to their home and live on the planet than to be in the sky, like says a lot for, you know, their connection to the earth. But again, honestly, Dylan, the first like 5 million times I watched this movie, I didn't think a lot about the messaging because I feel like it's not nearly as overt as...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think...
Okay. It's not as obvious, but I feel like it's there, but it's also just... You can sum it up by just saying, like, you shouldn't divorce yourself from the planet. Like, you need that to really be human and to really survive long term.
Yeah, at the core, for sure, I would say exactly what you're saying is don't divorce yourself from the planet. I think certainly this movie, as kind of Maddie was getting at, this movie's messaging isn't as clear or overt as other Miyazaki movies. Was that a negative for you, Maddie, or is it? How did you react to that and the ending of the movie?
I'm not sure how I feel about it, to be honest, because I know enough about Miyazaki, even though I haven't seen all his movies, to know that he is very big into this environmentalism. And not that that's a bad thing. I realize that I said that kind of in a way that might imply it's a bad thing. I am definitely not against that. But I think that it distracted me specifically because I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it from the movie to dive into that. And I think that's just a problem with my viewing of it, not the problem with the movie itself, because I was distracted by outside knowledge of the film.
Yeah, I could totally see that. It's I think like you get this scene where Sheeta and Pazu arrive at Laputa, and it's nature now, and everything. The robots are connected with nature, and everything's connected. And I think maybe you expect to get really deep, much deeper into that.
That's typically when I was expecting it. Yeah,
the movie instead does this kind of action climax with the technology and with the villain, which I think is part of all of the messaging.
Yeah, because it's like they almost don't even have time to really enjoy it because there's already this like very invasive force there that's like ripping gold off the walls and exploding things to get to all the gold. And there's just this mad, greedy scramble juxtaposed to like their very quiet, kind of intimate admiration of just everything around them. Yeah,
so I think that's really interesting because these other movies don't pan away from the scene with you think the messaging is coming. And I think it fits with just this lighthearted adventure movie that we don't dive too deep into anything. But certainly I think it plays against expectations of Miyazaki. This ending of Laputa going away from the earth is potentially one of the vaguest and most fascinating elements of a Miyazaki movie, this ending with this. And I mean, we could spend a long time talking about it. I don't think there's that much concrete to get into. Susan Napier in her Castle in the Sky chapter, it spends several paragraphs talking about it, and there's just a lot of different theories about what's being said here. Here's one section about it being an open-ended ending. In its final section, the movie becomes a provocative eco-fable, posing in unexpected ways the larger and profound contemporary questions about how humanity deals with technology and nature. Laputa seems to leave these questions open. It ends with a vision of the shining castle enmeshed in green roots, but taking off into the open sky. The children in the pirate family left behind to fly into an empty space. Nausicaä ended in an affirmation of the interconnectedness between humans and the natural world. Laputa's vision of the castle flying away blends science fiction and fantasy to ask whether humanity even deserves to be part of the world. It offers an unsettling view of humankind as orphans in exile from a potentially utopian home. This notion of Laputa as a utopia, I think, is kind of interesting at the end here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what the movie's even saying, though, about Laputa. Like, if it's a utopia.
I think it's certainly posited as a potential utopia by certain characters and civilizations
definitely.
in the world.
It's like they're Atlantis, right? So you can see that as either like a city of gold, of treasure, or as a city of just like opportunity, like newfound opportunity, or as like Muska, just a city of power. But I mean, it is an interesting thought that like, yeah, it literally is flying away from anything being able to touch it or potentially harm it again. Like it's getting out of the reach of humans, certainly, by going into space.
Yeah, it's like out of the reach of humans, so humans don't corrupt it further, and it's also like humans don't get this. Is kind of like
I
really like that though, because like they do focus on like Sheeta's kind of like wistful expression as they fly away from it for the last time, and she's not happy. She kind of looks like she's letting go of something really big that she knows she'll never see again. But I do think out of anyone, I feel like the movie really like it trusts that Sheeta and Pazu are going to be able to inherit whatever their Earth looks like right now in a way that's going to be positive for the future, because they haven't really like super grown and matured throughout the whole movie. It's more that just like they've always had these really strong, true convictions that the movie validates and poses against like the adults that don't want what they want for bad reasons, presumably. And like even like the space pirates, like they still just kind of like treasure. They don't really care about the Earth. Like they get along with Sheeta and Pazu, but like their goals aren't 100% aligned either, which is also interesting. Like, I wonder how much of it is like a generational kind of conversation about like what's important and who's going to inherit what, and like what value should we place on things. And like, does being an adult complicate that because you're supposed to want like power and money and control? And Sheeta and Pazu like don't care about any of that. Like they're willing to destroy all of Laputa to not have that.
I think that's really interesting because I saw those themes, but that's not like the ending message I got from it, just having watched it 2 hours ago at this point.
Fair.
Because I saw like there's the scene, like there's the really like I can already tell that it's iconic, the scene with the robot and like all the wildlife around him, and he's just kind of tending to it. And it was just so, it showed that the Earth has no problem with technology inherently. It's the way we use it.
Yeah.
And that's the message that I really got, that it wasn't ever about technology being bad. It was about people being bad, and that technology itself can interact with wildlife and nature in a way that is positive. Because that robot was tending to this wildlife, and these animals were like seeing it as almost like a guardian. And I thought that was really interesting and really powerful. I wish we had more of that, but again, I think that's kind of normal with Miyazaki films, in that like there's certain scenes I want more of them, and I really enjoyed that. But it leaves me conflicted on what exactly the shot at the end there means, because here's the technology that everyone in the movie was hunting after, and it's out of reach of anybody. And I think that it either means that some technology is always like can never be good in human hands. Like some technology just can't be good. And like that's like a thing in Japanese media because of very obvious real world connections to real life events. And I think that it's interesting to make that connection to how like some technologies just can't be used by humans in a way that is positive for the Earth. But I don't think the movie is inherently saying that technology is bad. That's what I'm trying to get
It's like what do people in power do with technology?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. I agree with all that. And I think you could, just as you could interpret like humanity doesn't get this utopia, you could interpret it as this is a thing that was corrupted by mankind's desires and now we're moving away from it. Type of thing.
Yeah, like you had your chance and you botched it, so goodbye.
And it's like the hope for humanity is on Earth now, not on Laputa.
And it's
yeah, exactly. Like you gotta go back to the Earth to make things right.
And I almost think that like movies saying like this part of Laputa, this part of the technology, this wasn't inherently bad, but this part you should never have made it to begin with. It's saying like, hey, why didn't you just stop at this? Look how beautiful this is. Look how beautiful this garden is. This place with all this wildlife and this enormous greenhouse. Like, you caused this. You created this by, like, however, like, whatever, like, order of events that caused that. But it's saying that, like, why'd you go further with the weapons, too? Like, why did you do that?
I think that's super fair, because, like, when Sheeta talks about, like, the old ancestors, the Laputians, it's hard to say it every time.
Yeah,
but, like, when you see that intro, like, it was, like, they started off just making things for the sake of just, like, making things. Like, they made digging machines to make their jobs easier. They made planes to fly places they could explore more. And then they made cities because it was, like, exciting and cool. And it only tore them apart when their technology got advanced to a point where they decided they could use it to, like, destroy other people. And that's what killed them, not necessarily everything leading up to that. So it was really about their greed more than anything. So I think that totally fits.
Yeah, I think it's a great discussion on like what the movie is saying and what it might be saying with the ending. I think the other aspect is just like this. It's talked about in that chapter in the book. There's this sense of loss from the ending. You know, this is something they're chasing after the entire time, and then it's floating away at the end. And that's kind of like an interesting theme of the movie. Just in general, more of a bittersweet ending than from the previous movie. It has a very hopeful ending. You know, I think it's happy, this ending of this movie, but you also get this this notion of this gorgeous thing that we just experienced is leaving. And even if it's a positive for humanity, even if it's something that humanity ruined and we're moving past it now, it still, I think, is a little sad at the end to see the Laputa going away. And it's an interesting tone to end the movie on.
It's very wistful. That's nice. Yeah.
Sorry, I just realized I had a dub question. Was the song at the end subbed for you?
It's in Japanese at that.
Yeah,
but
Japanese.
Did they sub it for you? Did they like have?
No, there weren't.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, because I had no.
I don't remember.
Like, because for me, it was just like all of a sudden there was Japanese, and it was kind of
it's good that they kept the song. They dubbed some of the later songs from Miyazaki.
So
yeah, I'm glad they kept the song. It's just that I'm like sitting there like, I wish I knew what this song was. Like, I wish I knew what they were singing.
Yeah, it's called "Carrying You."
Carrying You.
It's a good
Iconic.
Okay, we'll get back to soundtrack in a second. So that's just a good discussion.
We haven't talked about the music yet, Dylan.
What we haven't talked about. I need to talk. Okay, so we talked about one of my 3 favorite scenes of the movie, which was the Pazu and Sheeta keeping watch and Dola listening in. Favorite scene of this movie might be one of, if not my favorite scene of all time in anything, is what we've talked about. Pazu and Sheeta arriving at Laputa. There's an 8-minute sequence of when they land. They see the robot there. It saves the bird's nest. They are just like seeing Laputa. They are laughing on the grounds. They go inside and they're like walking through this forest. They see the other robot that had connected with the earth, and like just that whole sequence. That's like the high point of the movie for me. It's so magical. Everything about it's one of the most gorgeous scenes ever. So many incredible backgrounds and animation in that scene. And I really, really love them arriving at Laputa.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Maddie.
I just think that, like, I won't go into the other scene. I actually think that was my second favorite scene. I loved that scene a lot, though. And I loved, like I was saying about, I think I got into it when I was talking about the robot and, like, how that was, like, clearly the messaging for me. And I haven't talked about the animation much just because it's amazing. The animation's amazing. But there's the shot when they're tied together and like they lean over the edge and they spin and they almost fall off and Pazu like throws them back on the side. And it's just so energetic and I love it. And it just made me happy watching them be happy in this place. It was just so pure and good.
Yeah, that's in the beginning of that scene we're talking about, yeah.
The energy's so real. I feel very similarly. Like one of my standout scenes is honestly when they're getting chased by Dola and the rest of the Sky Pirates, and they're like hanging onto the edge of this like breaking down train track, and they fall, and then the necklace does the glowy thing, and they're just holding hands floating down. And Pazu's like, I knew it would do it.
Yeah,
like,
he's so
awesome.
excited.
Oh my god! He like almost falls off, and he like grabs his hand on both of hers to stay on. It's just like that kind of energetic, just kid wonder with no reservations. He's just living high in this moment despite everything that's going on.
He completely forgot that everyone's sun pointed at them.
It's just this joyous energy that's so infectious, like, and that their relationship has that so many times, and it's one of the fun parts about the movie for sure.
Yeah, that's great. They're holding hands a lot in the movie. It's really good. They do that in the sequence I was talking about too. Other sequence I want to highlight is the first time we see the robot, and the robot is when they're in kind of the fortress. The robot activates and starts destroying the fortress.
That is really cool.
Some of the best animation in the movie. Just the reds of the scene, the red color palette is incredible.
That's what I mean. The animation, like the shot of it blowing up that like those two metal doors and it like pooping down onto it, like that scene is so well animated. It's so gorgeous and so destructive. It's just, I loved that scene so much.
Yeah.
At one point, he like just makes it all like molten liquid so he can punch through it. It's just like he's got so many ways to like get to Sheeta. There's nothing gonna stop him.
Yeah, just that animation in that scene. The other animation I want to highlight is there's a brief scene of Pazu and Cheetah inside this the cloud before they get into Laputa. Just a really interesting style of animation there as well.
Is that when the lightning is like kind of dancing
around?
Yeah. And Pazu like almost sees them, like he has like the memory of his dad being in a similar storm when he took the picture, which is like kind of for him.
Yeah. This is one of the most gorgeous movies ever. Like, just those scenes, all these scenes we talked about, just in general in the movie. The cave scene is gorgeously animated too with the crystals. Yeah,
and when he gets just like on his roof with his little trumpet, and it's like he's like calling the town to wake up almost, and you just see the birds go over, and you just like you see the shot of this gorgeous little mining town, and it's just such a wonderful sense of place right there. It's so good.
That is actually my favorite scene in the entire movie. But I can't talk about why I love it because we haven't talked about the score yet, and I just love the music.
Okay, we can get back to the score. Some quick other topics before we get to the score. The robots. I want to talk about the robots a little bit more. I think this is in line with this iconic line of Miyazaki creatures. The robots from this movie. The Ohm from Nausicaa. I mean, you got Totoro coming up. That's the most iconic Miyazaki creature. You got
but soot balls are a close second.
The dust sprites. Yeah. There's a long. They would probably be the second most merchandised.
I think so.
But the robot here is. I love these robots. They're so influential on animation to come. I always want to call these the Guardians, because when I visited the Ghibli Museum last year, there's the highlight, I guess, in terms of like biggest thing is there's a giant robot from Laputa at the top of the building, and you go and take pictures with it, and it's really cool. And that one's called the Guardian of the Ghibli Museum. Just these robots start you see the destructive power in the scene in the fortress, and then you see like them harmonious with nature with that scene of them arriving there, and then you see them being destructive again and activated. Some of that's like I feel like is some of the most blatant messaging of the movie, but just the power, the design of the robots, how they're used in the animation. This is like if I think of Laputa, I think of one image. I think of the robot from this movie, the design of the robot. I think like this is it's interesting. This is like Miyazaki's concession in a way to the interests of Japan at the time. Like I said, they're like more into sci-fi and fantasy and robots, totally into robots. And so he makes the robot, and then he like does it. It's the same thing with like the monster from Nausicaa. It's like, and then you kind of subvert it and you make it like used for evil, and like it's supposed to be its ideal form is like being in tune with nature, and he like suits it to his themes, like totally.
I feel like especially when like so many of them are deployed on the castle in the sky by Moscow, like the way they move is so different. Like they're always kind of like scuttling around on their legs like spiders, which is like super terrifying. But when they're like just being guardians, they're like they walk around like humans, like which is kind of interesting, I think too. Like I don't know exactly what that means, but like even the way they like respond to things feels very different in their body language depending on if they're doing something under the command of like some guy or they're just left alone for thousands of years and come into this role of tending to things instead.
Yeah, we get to see the fox squirrels from
For a hot second. Yes.
I knew immediately, Dylan, that looking at those things, I'm like, this is Dylan's favorite moment of the entire
It looks like an Eevee, that's why.
It does.
It's Tato from Nazca, but there are a bunch of them there on top of the thing.
God. Yes.
And, fox squirrel, inspiration for the hybrid animals in Avatar. Okay, I mentioned that. So let's go, regular segment. What did this movie influence in all of the other animated properties we talk about on this podcast? So this we talked a ton about this in Nazca, but let's start with Avatar and Korra. I think the most obvious analog in Avatar and Korra to Castle in the Sky is the Cave of Two Lovers. The love is brightest in the dark. Like you could put out the torchlight, much like they do in this, and the crystals light up in the cave. Totally just directly from this movie.
Bioluminescence is a thing.
It's obviously a thing in general, but the use, I think the use of it in the use of it in this movie, specifically putting out the thing to light up the way, I feel like is taken from here, and I love that. The other Avatar connection I saw, which I don't know if I've seen this talked about too much, but I talked about how Paz and Cheetah go into this cloud to then go into Laputa. Mm-hmm. That looks like the glacier in the beginning of Avatar to me. Like it looks like very similar.
Rounded and spinny.
The kind of circular spinny form. Yeah, I see it.
I see like visual inspiration from that. The robots, we've talked about them. They're Iron Giant. This has not been something that has been explicitly talked about, I think, by Brad Bird, but I feel like the Iron Giant, the movie, a lot of inspiration from the robots in this movie. I read that Brian of Mike and Brian, the creators of Avatar and Korra, in the Korra Book 4 art book, talked about how the giant mecha in the Korra series finale is inspired by the robots in this movie, among other things.
Not surprised at all.
Okay, yeah, they have good taste.
In Susan Napier book, she talks about how she thinks WALL-E is largely inspired by the robots in this movie.
I hate to ask this, Dylan. Is this why we got those hummingbird mechs at the end of Korra?
Oh, go back to the dragonfly mech pirates use.
I think, as we'll see, as we'll cover, a lot of things Avatar and Korra is inspired by a lot of elements of these movies. But this one, and this one, no exception. The random thing is in Steven Universe, towards the end of season 5, I think Steven Conyer in jail, in Gem Homeworld, which is the same scene as Pazu in this movie when he's being in kept inside the fortress.
Yeah, Steven's trying to push his way out, I think.
Yeah.
There's also just in Mindful Education when they're both falling holding hands, that's either Spirited Away or Castle in the Sky too, directly.
Nice.
Nobody else holds hands falling from the sky like those two pairs of children.
Yeah.
You're not allowed unless you're Miyazaki
Pazu
characters. Yeah, that's it. Most recently, skip ahead a minute for She-Ra if you haven't seen the last season. At the end, the ship is turned into a tree and then is set floating into space.
Totally.
It's the exact same thing as that.
I was shook by that. I was like, oh, they watched my favorite movie. I'm so glad.
Space trees, sky trees, giant sky trees. This is a mythology element. This is a thing. But the fact that it's turned into reveals to be a tree and then it's very, very similar to the imagery of this movie at the end here.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing at the end of She-Ra. So there's a lot of stuff there. This is right with Nazca and some of the later ones too. Just a very influential, I think, movie on animation. Still putting off the score. One more topic. We haven't talked about
the
setting. Are you talking about the setting?
Their hometown. So the steampunk element of
this
this movie.
Now I can tell.
No. This was gonna be one of my top topics, and we didn't even get to it until now.
Yeah, we're getting to it now. I'm excited. Yay!
It's a steampunk fantasy movie. It's a big element of this, and their hometown is. This movie is a very European setting, and the Pazu's hometown specifically is inspired by Wales, where Miyazaki took a trip to right before he made this movie. And
I didn't know that. So he went there to study stuff and figure out
location scouting for this movie. And he saw the miners and the strife of the miners, and they went on strike during this time, and that maybe inspires some collectivity kind of themes. Miyazaki, I think, was a strike captain when they were at Toei Animation, which is interesting. Just this whole inspiration of the Welsh miners, which you see reflected in their hometown and translates into this steampunk world. Which I think this considered a very influential steampunk movie too on a lot of modern steampunk fantasy. The ships. Pazu and she'd have their little ornithopter, is I think what it would be called.
Oh my god, Dylan!
I love that you know that.
Well, no, Dylan's thinking about it.
It's honestly not. They know in the book they call it an ornithopter.
Oh my god, I hate it.
Yeah, it's a real ship.
I like it.
I hate it.
So, any comments in general, broadly, on just the overall setting of the movie?
I love the town. It's so comfy. It feels like a real town, and these feel like legit poor people. There's at one point where Pazu at the beginning, he's struggling with the elevator because it's a big boy job and he doesn't know how to do it gracefully yet, but he's trying. And they push out this cart and they're so exhausted, and it's really late in the day, and they're we didn't find anything. I guess we'll have to come back tomorrow. It just seems so disheartening, and they're not in a great situation, but the town itself is just they seem just really decent people. They protect Cheetah and Pazu as soon as they realize they're in trouble and hold off all of the pirates so that they can escape. And just they just seem to have this sense of community, especially with Pazu, because he lives alone on the top of a hill. But they check in on him, and they give him meatballs for his boss. And you just get a sense that this is just a real community of people that takes care of each other, even if they don't have a lot. And that's just so good, salt of the earth town, but in the best ways,
Yeah, that's really what they're going for. That kind of salt of the earth vibe. Also rocks of the earth. Yeah.
I actually had something to say.
Yes.
Not geology. I'm not going to go geology on you.
That's what I thought you were doing.
Excited about bioluminescent rocks.
Well, I'll say something about it, but the whole thing with me for this town is I really connected with when I like a location, I really connect with the visuals. If I don't think it's visually different or interesting, it doesn't really stick in my memory. And one thing that I noticed with this movie is that the way they make the town different most of the time doesn't have to do with what's actually in the town. It has to do with the way they frame it and the way they have the camera, because the camera is almost always framed a little higher than I would expect. The sky has this bigger portion than the ground does almost all the time. During the scene when Pazu is playing the trumpet, it shows Pazu standing on the roof, and the roof is very low, and there's all this sky around him. Mm-hmm. And it really gives off this, it really makes you feel like the sky is enormous, and there's so much space there. Obviously, the sky is big. I'm not trying to be stupid, but it's just trying to give you this idea of how expansive and how I think Pazu views the sky as this place that the castle is hidden. And I really enjoy that. Once we're it really feels like the camera wants to be let loose into the sky the whole time they're there. And then the other thing I really enjoyed about it was when they finally get into the sky and we're looking down at the city. I really like the little touch of there's all these sinkholes everywhere because of all the mining. There's all these pockmarks in the ground of where they dug a little too much and all the surface has fallen in on itself. And I really like that. at first I was like, oh, was there a war here? And then I looked a little closer. I'm like, oh no, this is from all the mining. It's really. I just think there was a lot of, and we didn't really get to see much of it. We saw a few of them from the ground, but like really from the sky, you see that there's like tons of them all along this valley.
Yeah, that's awesome point. And love the camera and the sky kind of analysis. Like that's great. I think this movie is such highlights Miyazaki's fascination with the sky and ships again.
He loves his planes.
Again.
Oh boy.
Yes. So this movie has some interesting plane designs compared to some other ones too, and you get a very like steampunk kind of in theme with the setting and everything. Okay, love all that. Last thing, the score, last major topic.
Thank God.
There's other things to bring up. So this is the second score legendary anime composer Joe Hisaishi has done for Miyazaki. I think there's an argument this is one of his best ones.
It's
absolutely
incredible.
One of his best ones. Like, however you feel about this movie and ranking, this score is top tier. Like, oh my gosh. Like, I started listening to this score like 10 years ago, and I've not stopped because there's so much variation.
What's your highlight, Michelle, since you've listened to so long?
Well, the main theme that, the lady sings carrying you, like, we hear the orchestral version of this in several different ways. Like, it's very sweeping in the beginning. You have the children's kind of choir humming it when Sheeta has her big moment. When she's talking to Muska, which is like a redone version of it that's like really solemn, but also like, I don't know, it just sounds like all these young children are like cheering Sheeta on to be like, yeah, you tell him he's not gonna get Laputa.
Yeah, that's in the destruction of Laputa on the soundtrack.
Yeah, like it's all the same theme, just like slightly tweaked, which I think is really nice because it really is like as much of the soul of the movie as the main two characters are. And it's just like Maddie was saying early on, it's just like a lot of this movie punches up just how beautiful it is on a whole other level. And it really sucks you into just like how gorgeous a lot of these moments are and how like entrancing like the world is in a way that's like hard to express, but very fun to watch,
Sorry, can I comment? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, because I want to talk about that scene when he plays the trumpet, because that scene is the one thing I feel bad about is that I've had not enough time to like dissect the score. I've had not time to say like this is I have not been able to internalize this is the main theme, this is the different ways they play it during the movie, but just this scene with the trumpet is so fantastic because if you play really close attention, none of the brass plays during that scene besides him. And so the rest of the orchestra is just the strings and like oboe and flute and stuff in the background and a little piano near the end when they transition to a different scene. But it's just so carefully constructed so that you don't get distracted from the trumpet because there's only one brass instrument during that whole scene in the background. And it's almost like Pazu's he's almost playing with an orchestra he's making up in his head. Like he's playing his song and he's like, this is what the orchestra would play around me. And it feels very childish and very light and very lovingly crafted that it feels like that. And I really love it because when I played it for when I'm like humming a song, like I imagine that there's this, like I always sometimes imagine that there's like something there with me, like there's like the music there with me, or there's someone else singing with me, like just to harmonize or something. And he's imagining that his town is this very quiet, very carefully curated orchestra of just quiet instruments around him as he's waking them all up, and I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I love that too. Some other, as I was listening through the soundtrack, some other highlights other than the one you guys were talking about. My favorite of the soundtrack is A Sea of Clouds in the Moonlight, which is what plays when Pazu and Sheeta are keeping watch, which is just like a softer version of the Pazu and Sheeta. I believe the Pazu and Sheeta theme, which does recur throughout the soundtrack. There are, if you listen to the whole Hisaishi soundtrack, there are a lot of themes that recur throughout a lot of these. But yeah, that one is specifically, I think, is just this really great soft one that's playing during that scene.
The cave music too, I think it stands out just because it feels very different from everything else, and it has this air of just kind of like mystery beneath the surface that it's just really it's a nice juxtaposition to like a lot of the more like crazy running around or explosions we see. Like it's a very different vibe, and I feel like that's a good palate cleanser at that point in the movie too.
Nice. Castle in the Sky, titular song is what plays when they arrive at Laputa, that scene I've been talking a lot about.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a wonderful one. I love Sheeta's Decision. That's a really gorgeous one to check out on the soundtrack.
Is that
There's
the
so
one
many bangers, right? There's so many. Like,
A lot.
the
Yeah, I'm
whole
not even done
soundtrack
yet.
Is Sheeta's Decision the one that Michelle was talking about with the humming?
Not 100% sure when
I
this
don't
plays
think
in the
that
movie.
it's very close to it, like in the score ranking numbers.
It's
but
in the middle of the movie.
Oh, so it might have been okay. I won't guess. It's not worth it.
So I guess it's after this other one, which one? Robot Soldier Resurrection Rescue, which is when the robot's destroying everying.
Was it when
Yeah.
she didn't join the pirates? Because that was like a big thing.
Yeah, maybe that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably that. Yeah, I guess there's another Carrying Euryth chorus. That's true. I see that one. So maybe it was that one you were talking about earlier. And then The Girl Who Fell from the Sky, the intro song, always amazing.
So iconic.
Yeah. Maddie, any other stuff from the score?
Just that I wish I had more time to sit with it. Wish I had more but that's me being dumb. We all know that. I just struggle with that. I wish I had time to really dissect it, but I just love clearly the orchestra itself is incredible. And that alone is just a huge step, because there are orchestras that are less good than others. And this one is just so good at being quiet, at being just present, but not pushing into the movie. And that's kind of the best scores are kind of hard to pick out the first viewing, which I struggled with, because you're just focused on the emotions it's giving you. Yeah,
Maddie, I'd say Joe Hisaishi, known as kind of a minimalist composer.
Yeah, for sure.
But despite that, I really don't think this is a minimalist. There's a lot of bombastic music. During that chase scene, the really exciting chase scene.
Yes.
Right after the manly funny scene that happens, there's all the brass is just coming in a way that I was not expecting from this movie. It's just the brass is hitting you hard as all these cars and trains and pirates are rushing in, and it's just very in your face until we get to the scene where they're in the cave, and then it gets a lot quieter, and there's just so much range to the score in this movie that I just am kind of stunned by it, that they
absolutely
that he hits all of these, and it all feels like the score fits with itself, and I really enjoyed it.
You also just have that really good moment where Sheeta's about to explain to Pezu what her lineage is, which is right when they get captured, and the music goes from this very quiet version of the score to this really sharp kind of terrified, nervous energy that makes you very uncomfortable, but it's so perfect in that moment. And when Sheeta wakes up when the robot finds her and is shooting around itself out of self-defense, and she sees the world just covered in flames, and she's horrified, that has a very particular score that has a lot of that kind of angry energy that feels so right for that moment. But yeah, you're right. There is a lot of range for the score.
I think now that you've mentioned it, I did really enjoy that every time Muska was on scene in shot, essentially, the score took this almost uneasy, it almost went into, I have not listened to it again. I would need to listen to it more, but it feels almost like it went into minor keys a lot, and it went very, very dark, and it really changed the tone. And that's probably why I never really questioned Mark Hamill
that he was evil
or that he was evil, that it was too campy, because the score takes the character so seriously, and it gives them so much weight to them. The score, in the best movies, the score is a character, and in this movie they really do that, and the score is a character, and it just elevates each character in a different way. I need to listen back and see what Dola's theme is, because I'm sure that Dola is lifted up in a similar way, and I just can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, now that I think about it, the music for the chase scene with the pirates on the train tracks is a little more rompy than anything else after. Yeah. But I think that's definitely on purpose, because Dola is not as much as a threat as Muska is, so it's a little more fun with her music.
Now that I'm thinking on it, maybe that's what their theme was. Maybe that's Dola's thing, because when they're in the pirate ship, it's always so fun and exciting, and when Pazu comes up beneath her after the fart joke, it's very very bouncy and fun. And
it's a little more bouncy. Yeah, it's a good way to put
it. And I think that's what I need to listen to it, but I think that might be what they add to that Dola's theme adds that to the movie. Instead of being this nice, soft, or nice, very melodic theme, she adds this rambunctious energy to the cast and the music.
Totally.
Yeah, nice. I'm looking on Spotify. I also see Symphonic Suite Castle in the Sky from 2018. I want to check that out.
What is that?
I don't know. So,
I don't know, but you're going to listen to it.
You better share that in Discord later.
I'll post it. It says by Joey Saishi. I think it seems like an official thing. Okay, yeah, it's excited to track the music more. That's something I wasn't as in tune to on previous visitings of all these movies that I'm paying more attention to now. So it's very exciting to listen to these a lot more. Okay, Michelle, final thoughts. Castle in the Sky. We've talked about a lot. Anything else?
I want you to read that note about supportive collectivity because I think it's good.
Okay, I can read that. There's a lot of really interesting things. Some things I'm hesitant to bring up because they're so complicated. So I think just find it hard to talk about.
This is part of what's appealing, just because, like, I feel like, again, like, part of what really struck me about Shida and Pazu is, like, I can't think of a Western adventure movie that isn't, like, so about, like, self-individual actualization. And this movie, which, like, again, it has, like, a lot more Eastern priorities, which tend to be a lot more communal-based than, like, self-based. I feel like the fact that, like, the communities of the pirates and the miners is, like, part of what makes this so nice, because it's never, like, about one person. It's about, like, everyone supporting each other and doing the right thing that benefits the maximum amount of people possible, instead of just, like, someone finding themselves alone. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big deal.
I think you're kind of summarizing it. So here's from Susan Napier. She says, the pirates and mine workers offer the possibility of a supportive collectivity, an image that becomes a staple of Miyazaki world, and an ideal that the director clearly hoped to establish in concrete form at Studio Ghibli. In his animations, these utopian collectives range from the pastoral communities of High Harbor and Conan, or the Valley of the Wind in Nausicaa, to the ill-assorted but endearing workies of Tadara and Princess Mononoke. Laputa, with its glorious gardens presided over by gentle artificial intelligence, also calls to Miyazaki but ultimately drifts out into the sky. The potential for genuine utopia remains with humans if only they can manage to connect fruitfully with the non-human world and with one another.
Aww. Yeah. It's just, I find that very hopeful and very, like, needed.
That's kind of the hopeful reading of it, yeah. We can do this on Earth. We don't need the utopia.
And, like, it would be better to support each other instead of trying to crush and intimidate each other by searching for more power over than sustainability, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you're right. I think it's a good note to end on with the movie. And I think we talked a little bit about the kind of collective nature, especially of Pazu and Shida, as reflected in larger parts of the movie too. Maddie, any final thoughts?
I did have one thing written down. It was less of a thought, more of a question. Okay, I have one question for you about the dub, and it is, they mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah in the climax with Muska. Like, Muska.
Yeah, that's real.
That's real.
Okay. I was just curious if that was.
It's a weird moment when they're like, "Yeah, this is real. This happened throughout history."
Yeah, you're like,
Sodom and Gomorrah, and I'm like, and I was like, "Is this a dub thing?"
That is like a very name drop moment.
It was interesting, but I'd also like to bring attention to how crazy it is that Muska from 40 plus feet away shot off both of her pigtails.
Very good shot, Maddie.
Such a good shot. It's so incredible.
This is actually a good point to bring up because, like,
what do you think about the hair change?
It is no secret that Miyazaki freaking loves his girls with short hair. It is his preference. Every girl's gonna have short hair. If she doesn't have short hair in the beginning, she will by the end. Like, every girl. I think Chihiro,
what does it mean, Michelle?
Chihiro is the only one who gets to have long hair, but it's because she puts it up in a ponytail for a lot of the movie, so it's fine. But everyone else has very short hair. I think it's lovely. I think it's nice that he's so pro short haired girls. Like, yes, I am too.
I'm sure that's what he's thinking when he does this at the end.
But
I want to be pro
short hair. Short hair. It's just, I think, like, to me, it's like a sign of just, like, rebelliousness and just, like, freedom. And, like, a lot of his hair animation, it's like when your hair is, like, really tied back and contained, you can't, like, show that kind of expressiveness the same way you can with short hair. And I just, like, I think it's so good. It's like,
I really liked my final thought.
A little looser and standing up a little more, and her hair's free now, so she can do anything.
I really liked hearing my final thought from Michelle, Dylan.
I
Is that
love.
what you were gonna say? All of that?
Yeah,
You just say
definitely,
ditto. You say
definitely.
ditto to all that? Okay.
One thing I will add to that is that I really enjoy, because obviously they have the Ghibli like hair standing up thing when the girl gets mad, and they have that with her with the pigtails, and it's so funny because it stands up and the pigtails start to stand up, and it's just so funny to me, and I absolutely loved it.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, okay. We didn't talk enough about all the hair though.
Hair
so I'm glad
animation
we got
is
that in
good.
there.
Or we didn't talk enough about food. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
we didn't
okay,
talk
we could
about the
get-
egg sandwich. Maddie
Okay,
wanted.
there's an egg
No.
sandwich.
There's an egg sandwich. It's not an egg sandwich. It's egg on bread.
Open face sandwich.
Yeah.
Still
Okay,
sandwich.
we're not getting into what constitutes a sandwich. Okay. So we're not talking about that.
I liked the old man in the cave. I thought he was a sweet old man.
Yeah.
And he was so blinded by the power and beauty of the rock that he asked her kindly and politely to put it away so he wouldn't have a heart attack.
Uncle Palm.
Uncle Pom. He's so cute. He's just a little old man in a cave enjoying the rocks. Like, yeah.
Why did he almost have a heart attack? I'm still confused by
Because, like,
that.
so he's used to, like, tiny amounts of that same stone living in the rocks. And, like, he can, like, sense their energy. He's really into them. And I think the fact that she found a piece that was so big and so powerful, it was, like, overwhelming him.
Oh, he just got really excited.
He got really excited.
Really,
He's like,
really
oh, this
excited.
is too much for my heart because I'm the rock guy and I can't handle this big piece of rock that
Gotcha.
I love so much. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, we'll end on Dr. Palm. Uncle Palm. Uncle
The
Palm.
biggest
Yeah.
important thing we could end
He's
on.
the rock doctor. That's
He's
his
the rock
license.
doc. He kind of is, though.
Rock
Kind of.
doc.
Rock dog.
Okay, that's a geologist. Okay, so
Wow.
that's what that means. That was a great discussion on Castle in the Sky. We got into so much. Thank you guys, and thank you for those listening. And if you made it through the whole thing, let us know what you thought of our discussion on this movie, overlyanimated.com. Send us comments anywhere else. You can sort of see all the links there for how you can get in touch with us. The way to support us would be through Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Rebecca. And thanks as always to our patron executive producers, Ryan, Steve Ox, Peter Hugh, Michael, Needle, and Phoenician. The Ghibli rewatch continues with a big tonal shift next week in Grave of the Fireflies. Stay tuned for that one. No, Michelle, because she couldn't handle it.
Handle it. It's broken. So
I have never
bad.
seen Grave of the Fireflies, and I'm
Maddie,
I'm
don't
kind
watch
of
it
okay
alone.
with not seeing
But I
it.
keep telling everyone, just do not watch it alone. It's not a good idea.
why
Oh my god.
Watch it without me.
I didn't know you wanted to watch it.
I don't want to watch it. I don't
okay,
think anyone
okay,
wants to
okay.
watch that movie.
Yeah, no one wants
You
to
know
watch.
what?
Yeah, but we'll talk about the brilliance, the depressing brilliance of Grave of the Fireflies next week. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.